If you're amongst the 4 million people who live in a house classified as leasehold, then make sure at the moment you put down anything you might be doing and listen up. Because there are some experts who say that you may well be sitting on a ticking time bomb that could create big, big problems when it comes to selling your home. Buying a home is an expensive and tricky business at the best of times. But what is really crucial to know is whether you're getting a freehold or a leasehold property, because it could end up costing you a fortune if you're not sure why the difference matters.
I don't know if it's got something to do with a rental property or what. I honestly couldn't tell you.
I believe that it's probably better to have a freehold property, but to be honest with you, I'm not really certain what leasehold actually means.
The leasehold is when you don't own the land that your property's on, I think.
In England and Wales, when you buy a leasehold property, you're not really buying the bricks and mortar or the land on which the property sits. That would be freehold. Instead, you're buying the right to live in the property for the term of the lease. Now, usually this amounts to the same thing, as many leaseholds come with a 999-year lease. But some homes, such as these in Cramlington in Northumbria, were sold when they were built in the 1960s with just a 99-year lease. And now, decades on, this is spelling trouble for owners like Trevor Wharton, who's being told it will cost thousands of pounds to extend the lease. Trevor came to own this flat after his father recently died.
Unfortunately, in January this year, he passed away. In actual fact, he was up having dinner one minute and chatting to the nurses, went back to his bed, and the next time he was checked on, unfortunately, he'd gone.
After inheriting the house, Trevor planned to help his own son, Chris, get into the property business. The idea was to sell it to Chris, then use some of the proceeds to help Chris pay his deposit.
Every dad wants to help his children out, and this was an ideal opportunity for our Christopher to get into something he's wanted to get into for a while, a little small property business.
Chris himself had big plans for where the flat could take him.
I've always had this dream to maybe own a small flat, maybe turn that into profitable business, and then eventually maybe have enough capital to sell the properties and maybe to build the dream home that I want for me and my family.
With the flat valued at £55,000, Trevor earmarked £10,000 for Chris, and the rest would be used to help make his retirement more comfortable.
As a windfall, for me, it's very important. It gives financial security.
But it was only as the sale process went ahead that the problems with the lease became apparent.
I was under the impression, as was my dad, that the flat had about 76 years left on the lease. I applied for a mortgage, which was successful. And then when it came to searches with a solicitor, we actually found out it had 48 years left.
So what, you might think? But as Chris was about to find out, mortgage lenders typically require leases to extend for a minimum of 40 to 50 years beyond the end of the mortgage. That's because the value of the property will become lower as a result of the remaining period of the lease getting shorter.
The mortgage lender would not lend on anything that was less than 50 years at the end of the term, so it makes the property unmortgageable.
With most of the flats in Cramlington originally sold with similar 99-year leases, it's a problem that many more people in the area are facing. Paul Reynolds is a local estate agent.
This is a very big problem across Cramlington. Most people I come across probably haven't thought about it very much and think we'll leave it later on, there's no hurry, you know, we've got plenty of time. Oh, well, after all, there are 50 years left on the lease, which sounds like a long time, but in building society and bank terms, it isn't.
What's more, in recent years, many mortgage firms have been clamping down on the length of leases they're prepared to lend on.
The banks have become, if you like, more picky and choosy about loans, house loans, larger percentages, and certainly looking at the diminishing terms on leases, it certainly is becoming a big problem. Many solicitors, in fact, may tell you to avoid a leasehold property.
Now, in order to get a mortgage to buy the flat, Trevor and Chris would have to pay for a 90-year lease extension. So Chris got in contact with the freeholder, the people who owned the land, to find out how much this would actually cost.
When my granddad had inquired about the lease in 2005, the price he was quoted at that time was £1,500 premium with £100 ground rent. However, when the property management company came back to us, the price was actually 10 times as much. It was closer to £15,000 with the legal fees than it was. So I got quite a shock when that came through. It represents a very big chunk of money that we just don't have.
£15,000 to extend the lease by 90 years may sound steep, but by law, the freeholder is entitled to charge the leaseholder a fee, usually determined by a share in the increase in the value of the property as a direct result of the lease extension. So the longer you leave it to renew your lease, the more you're likely to pay in a lump sum should you need to extend it. There were other options available that would reduce the £15,000 lump sum, but all of it involved a huge hike in ground rent, which Chris was concerned would put off future buyers.
Is that price going to put off future buyers? If that price represents 2 months' rent for the property, how is your business viably going to take those costs on?
So if Chris can't make the sums work, then thanks to the short lease, his dad may be forced to sell the property on the open market for far less than he was hoping for.
We don't want to do the property up and then lose a lot of money on it if we've got to sell it at a lower price.
But Trevor and Chris's situation is not unusual. Across England and Wales, over 750,000 properties have been sold with a 99-year lease. So solicitors like Gary Rycroft would say that it's critical that homeowners extend their lease before it drops below the 80-year mark.
Leasehold property can be a ticking time bomb. If your lease has less than 80 years to go, then it will start to lose value quickly and significantly. Whilst you are entitled to ask your landlord to extend the lease, your landlord is entitled to ask you to share what's called the marriage value with you. Now, marriage value is the increase in value that your property will benefit from by extending the lease. But if your lease has dropped below 80 years, your landlord is entitled to ask you to share that marriage value by up to 50%.
A pretty astonishing figure. But Chris is trying to negotiate with the freeholder to reduce the cost of the lease extension so that his dad can get a better price for the property to help with his retirement. And when we got in touch with the property management company acting on behalf of the freeholder, they said that the lease extension system works well for the vast majority of people. And the new leasehold premium has to take into account house price increases over the period of the lease, which the leaseholder stands to benefit from. But for Chris, the premium quoted feels simply too high.
It's not an ideal situation to be in, having to pay this lease or having to potentially lose the flat. I would obviously rather continue on with the property. It's what I wanted to do. I give my dad some money to live out the rest of his life in a comfortable manner.